Hi everybody, thank you for joining me. So I'm doing my Beatles and Solo Ultimate Album Ranking Series at the moment, where I'm looking to throw together over 100 albums to create what I think is going to be the biggest Beatles album ranking out there. I've already done Paul, John and George, and I've thrown those all together. Now it's time for Ringo, and then I'm going to add the Beatles into the mix in a future video. Now, I actually recorded this video a few weeks ago, and I wasn't very happy with it. The reason being was that I didn't know all of Ringo's albums at the time. So I felt like I was kind of doing half a job. I put a message out saying, would you like me to wait a few weeks and give myself a chance to get to know all of Ringo's albums properly, or just go ahead and do it? And 77% of you said, wait until you can do it properly. Thanks everybody. No, seriously, thank you, because it's allowed me to do this properly and actually get to know a lot of albums that I didn't really know before. So here goes. I am going to do a bit like I did before. I've got a load of Ringo albums here. I've got another load of Ringo albums that are going to have to come in a part 2 because this would be so long a video. I'm going to do like I did with the others, where I'm going to work my way back chronologically. So I'm going to start with his most recent EP, work my way back, and slot each album into the ranking where I feel it fits. In terms of my enjoyment, that's the criteria that I'm using. So I have included the EPs. That was a question that some people asked me, would you include them? And the reason that I have is because Ringo himself has said that he feels that he's probably not going to make albums anymore, and that these are his albums now. So these aren't an addition to his albums. They kind of are now, even though they're very short. So I have included those. So let's crack on without further ado. So we're starting at the beginning, or the end if you like, so I'm working backwards. EP3 that just came out last week. So I've had a few listens to this now, and it's kind of okay. The first 3 songs on here, World Go Round, Everyone and Everything, and Let's Be Friends, are kind of, if you're familiar with Ringo's particular brand of rock over the past sort of 2 or 3 decades, there's nothing really that'll surprise you there. Everyone and Everything's got a bit more of a country tinge to it, but it's kind of typical Ringo fare. The most interesting one is Free Your Soul, which is the last song on here, and that is, it's jazzy, it's Latino, and it's just musically a lot more interesting. So that's the standout for me. So this is kind of the benchmark at the start. This is going in the ranking in its own place, and we'll see as we move backwards where everything fits around it. So we've then got, going back to late last year, late 2021, Ringo's second EP, Change the World. This, to me, of the 3 is kind of the least interesting of the 3. It doesn't really have any tracks that have sort of stayed with me in my brain, whereas the other 2, I'm sort of quite familiar with them, but I've listened to this one just as often, and it hasn't gone in there. So I don't find this as interesting as the other 2. So at the moment, this slots into second place in the ranking. We then move back to Ringo's first EP, Zoom In, from early 2021. And this is, again, it's kind of typical Ringo, but it's sort of typical Ringo in the better sense of what he's done over the last few decades. Here's to the Nights is a good sing-along song. We've got a bit of reggae in there with Waiting for the Tide to Turn. And then Not Enough Love in the World, again, a kind of another typical Ringo pop rock song from the last few decades. But overall, whereas on the third EP there's kind of one song that I find interesting, there's at least a couple here sort of verging towards 3 songs that I quite like on here. So at the moment, Zoom In goes into first place. Now, for the actual proper albums that we're going to move on to now, I have made copious notes. I've made an awful lot of notes for every album. I've had to chop them down for this video, otherwise it would go on for hours. I'm going to post my full notes that I typed for every album. If you want to see that, if there's anybody out there who's remotely interested in that, I'm going to post the full notes on Facebook and Twitter. There's links down there where you can see where you can find that. For now, I'm kind of sort of picking out my highlights or lowlights of the album with kind of an overall how I feel about the album. So I'm going to have to refer to my notes here because there's just so much to get through. So we're going to What's My Name from Ringo from 2019. Now the song on here that's always been the one that I've gone back to most of all is the opening song on the album, Gotta Get Up to Get Down. It's silly, it's a bit of a sort of a nonsense rocker, but I find it quite enjoyable. Ringo's sort of getting up to date, talking about people wasting the time on Facebook and Twitter and that kind of thing. And it's kind of a daft rocker that features Joe Walsh as well, but I do quite like it. So overall, I think with this one, I think Ringo has made much better albums over the last few years. There's no obvious standout song apart from the one that I kind of prefer. And it did kind of leave me feeling that his decision to move on to EPs after that might not be a bad decision. So at the moment, What's My Name is going into third place. We then move back to Give More Love from 2017. I don't have that on CD actually, but I've been able to get really sort of good copies of every album to be able to properly review them. So, we've got Show Me the Way on here. What a slow song that is. My goodness, I thought it needed a bottle of Lucasade to liven it up. I just wanted it to get a move on, which is a shame because I thought if it was a bit faster, there was like a good song lurking in there, but I thought it was spoiled by how slow it was. It's a little bit like Paul McCartney's Your Loving Flame from the Driving Rain album, where when he did it live, he just increased the speed a bit and it helped the song so much, and I thought that could have happened here. Electricity, song called Electricity. We're back in Liverpool. Ringo's done a lot of these sort of autobiographical songs over the last few years, talking about his time in Liverpool with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, that kind of thing. This is another one of those where he's talking about working in a factory and being with Rory Storm. It's like a real sort of foot-tapping tribute to Johnny Guitar, real name John Byrne, who was the guitarist in Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. He passed away in 1999, but this is kind of a tribute to him. The kind of interesting thing about this album is at the end there are 4 bonus tracks but that are actually part of the main album, and they're all covers of previous Ringo songs. And we've got a cover of Back Off Boogaloo, which has never been a song that I've particularly enjoyed, to be honest. This is like a decent, lively, rocking version, but I don't think I'm ever going to like Back Off Boogaloo as a song, whatever version it's in. There's a version of Don't Pass Me By, or a cover of Don't Pass Me By here. A real laid-back country-style version, and it sounds much sadder. I think a lot of things, if you sing them in a slow country style, they automatically become a lot sadder, as does this. If you didn't know that this was a Beatles song, you wouldn't believe it if somebody told you. It doesn't sound anything like a Beatles song here. Some might argue it probably never did in the first place. But it fades out as well with Ringo repeating, I'd like to be under the sea several times, which is quite nice to hear. And it's a nice version. I enjoyed this version. There's You Can't Fight Lightning, which is it was a bonus track on the CD issue of Stop and Smell the Roses. Slow bluesy groove. I didn't find it particularly interesting, to be honest. And then there's a cover of Photograph at the end, Ringo's classic. It's a laid-back Nashville country sound. And the quality of the song, Photograph, is such a great song that I think you've really got to go some to mess that up. So it sounds great because the quality of the song just kind of shines through. Very enjoyable version. Overall, this album, I thought it was his most overtly sort of country style effort since Bokus of Blues in 1970. More than a third of the album was done in a country style. It's enjoyable. I think it had a real good sort of middle section to the album, and that lifts it above probably many Ringo albums from this stage of his career. And at the moment, I'm putting that in first place. We then go back to Postcards from Paradise from 2015, and we've got another autobiographical song. It's called Rory and the Hurricanes. You can guess what that's about. It's cheesy, but you know, if we're not going to get an autobiography from Ringo, and he said he doesn't want to do one, this is going to have to do. It's more of a kind of an affectionate look back at that period. There's no great reveals, really. Postcards from Paradise, the title track, the auto-tune on Ringo's voice is kind of starting to become prominent by this stage in his career, and it's not always easy to get past. Lyrically, this song is interesting because he tries to make the end of each line have some sort of Beatles song reference in it, so that holds your attention even if the song itself is not particularly great. If it didn't have you sort of listening out for those Beatles tunes, it would be something of a nothing song, I think. We then have a song called Right Side of the Road, and it's becoming very noticeable now that this is a slower album than Ringo's usually done. This is a 12-bar blues, as we find many times throughout this album. Not Looking Back is a song that comes up soon. Another slow one, but it's a love song. It's got a string back in, good melody. As a piece of songwriting, best song on the album by far, so far on this album. Bambula picking up the pace here. I was a bit baffled by this one. It seems to flip from continent to continent, but essentially it's a fancy arrangement of a 12-bar blues again, occasionally slipping into minor key. It reminded me a bit of Paul McCartney's Back in Brazil, but I love Back in Brazil. This wasn't really on the same level for me, but it reminded me of it in style. We've then got Island in the Sun, which is it's the first studio recording to feature Ringo's full all-star band of whoever was in the all-star band at the time. So it's kind of notable for that, even if it's not particularly... I didn't find it a great song. Overall, this album seems to too often fall back into just being 12-bar blues, but disguised as something else. It tries to sort of change the production or the style of it to make it maybe not sound like a straight 12-bar blues. But it kind of dated it for me. It made it feel like it wasn't an up-to-date album, and I didn't think it helped. It made it sound as though it was stuck in an old genre. I was impressed by the guitar throughout, though. It was kind of meaty tones of it. But overall, so far, I'm putting this one in second place. We then go back to Ringo's album, Ringo 2012. You can surely work out what year that one's from. Starts off with a song called Anthem. It's got a Glass Onion drum intro. Listen to that first second of this song. It is Glass Onion. The production of the song feels like it's from the era of Ringo's Vertical Man album. It's like a return to a classic Ringo sound. Decent but unspectacular rocker, I found. Ringo's covering himself here. He's got a cover of the song Wings, which was originally from the Ringo the Fourth album. This is much more kind of a reggae flavour. And he's also covering Buddy Holly here, a cover of Think It Over from 1958. It was a good up-tempo version. I could imagine if Brian Wilson covered the song, I could imagine it sounding very much like this. And again, another cover of a really old song here, Rock Island Line. I had a real problem with this one, but only because I like previous versions of this song so much that this couldn't live up to it. I really like Johnny Cash's version. Lonnie Donegan's sort of first main version is good, but Lonnie Donegan did a cover of it in 1956, sort of like a cover of his own version, that is just one of my favourite things. And unfortunately, this can't live up to it, so I was kind of disappointed by it. And then we've got a song called In Liverpool. It was the third album in a row where Ringo had done a song about Liverpool or about his sort of memories of Liverpool. His intention being to recount early parts of his life in song. It's affectionate, it's sung with love. Best song on the album so far as I was concerned. Overall for this album, it's kind of mid-tier Ringo, I think. Nothing objectively bad here, which is a phrase I kind of find myself repeating for a lot of Ringo's albums. There's nothing that you can pinpoint and say, that is bad, even if some of it you maybe don't find too memorable. But a lot of it is retreads of what we've had before. But good enough overall for me to put it in second place at the moment. We then go back to the album Why Not from 2010, and we've got a song on here called Peace Dream. It's Paul McCartney on bass, and you can tell it's a proper melodic bass line. It's typical McCartney. The bass line sounds great. Ringo references John and Yoko's Amsterdam bed in here, and there's kind of subtle synths throughout, which supposedly is part of the issue that caused Ringo to have a fallout with Mark Hudson, who'd been his sort of long-time collaborator. Certainly not the only issue, but that was rumoured to be part of the issue. Mark Hudson didn't want to go down this sort of synthy route. The Other Side of Liverpool comes up soon, following on from the Liverpool 8 album. Again, Ringo's talking about his hometown again, remembering his really early days, the friends and who he played with and where he worked pre-fame. Good bluesy tune. We've then got Walk With You, a duet with Paul McCartney, and Paul comes in really prominently with a harmony line on the vocals, and it sounds great. It just really lifts the song. It's so obviously Paul, and it's so obviously one of Paul's great harmonies. So you can see why Paul might have chosen to want to work on that song. It's just classy, and I think it's the addition of Paul McCartney that really lifts it. We've got Mystery of the Night on here. It's like a big 80s style overdriven chorus lead guitar. The whole song's big. I could imagine the girls from ABBA singing this. It would have been an interesting ABBA song. And I can't deny that I really enjoyed Mystery of the Night. And then the title track, Why Not? It's like really attention-grabbing bass and drums intro. Reminded me of the kind of thing that Paul McCartney might have done in the 1980s. And he would have got crucified for it had he done it. But it feels like Ringo gets away with it. And then it's got like an unexpected but very welcome Indian interlude that I enjoyed in this song. So overall, again, I didn't think there was any clunkers on this album, but definitely a few tunes that didn't quite have the same impact as much of what was on his previous few albums. Mystery of the Night, standout song by a mile, along with the Walk With You that he did with Paul McCartney. Overall, again, this goes into second place at the moment. We then have Liverpool 8 from 2008. I don't have the album, but I do have the CD single, and I've always enjoyed the title track, Liverpool 8. It's one that, again, Ringo's looking back on his time in Liverpool. He actually got a bit of a hammering at the time from the people of Liverpool because he made some comments about not particularly wanting to go back to Liverpool, and he made them on national TV. Well done, Ringo. It didn't go down too well, but it's a song that I've always pretty much enjoyed. There's a song called For Love, which just sounded to me like the kind of thing that Liam Gallagher has been doing for the last few years. Ringo's drums have got some real good punch to them in this song, and it was quite an enjoyable song. And then there's a song called Gone Are the Days, which, again, we seem to be in Oasis mode here. If you know the Oasis song Who Feels Love, very, very similar vibe to that. That song came first before Ringo's song. So I don't know whether, because we have a sort of a Liam style song and an Oasis style song, whether Ringo was deliberately trying to go down that route. I'm not quite sure. Give It a Try threatens to be one of those sort of Ringo late 70s or early 80s songs where you think, why has he done this? But it kind of just avoids falling into that trap. It's got Latin beats, jaunty tune, but it feels a little bit out of place to me. Harry's song, French jazz feel, Django Reinhardt kind of influence I felt here, but also I felt a really strong George Harrison presence. Obviously George wasn't on this album, he'd passed away several years early, but it felt very much a George Harrison style to me. Love Is a gentle ballad, lovely close mic'd Ringo vocals, touch of reverb, and joined by a cello later on, and it's just got a really classy feel to the song. I thought that was a really good song. Overall, this album marks the end of Ringo's collaboration with Mark Hudson, which I think, as I go back through the albums, we'll find really important to Ringo's career for kind of the best part of 20 years, really. This is a decent album. I thought it was quite enjoyable, but there's no massive standout songs on here. But it's good enough at the moment for me to put it into third place. We then have, from 2005, Choose Love. So this opens with a song called Fading In, Fading Out. Unashamedly a happy song. It's a big rousing opening to the album. Plenty of Beatles influences here. The ending just sort of sounds like very Magical Mystery Tour, Hello Goodbye kind of ending. Then there's a song called Wrong All the Time. It feels like 70s Ringo. It's very much of that kind of style, an old time ballad. If he'd made it 20 years earlier, it would have kind of sounded out of place and Ringo sort of been out of his time frame. Whereas here it's got a more modern production that sort of suits the song, I think, a lot better. He's got a duet with Chrissy Hynde called Don't Hang Up. But it's feeling like I could use a kind of a different production style by this point of the album. It's getting a bit samey. Backing vocals on this were interesting. If you know the song called Sound of Drums by Cooler Shaker, one of my favourite bands, the backing vocals were almost identical towards the end. Then the title track, Choose Love, funky opening, good guitar riff, sounded a bit like Drive My Car style. There was also some of the bass and guitar tones reminded me a bit of Helter Skelter, so that was pretty interesting. Still the same production style, but there was a rockiness to this that just kind of lifted it a little bit and made it an enjoyable song. A song called Satisfied comes up with a very George Harrison style lead guitar. Again, it's not George, he wasn't around by this point. I could imagine this being a kind of an up-tempo Roy Orbison Travelling Wilburys song, or maybe Roy's Mystery Girl era. Sounds very much like that. And then at the end of the album, we've got a song called Free Drinks. It's quite striking how it's very sort of thin, trebly EQ on Ringo's voice, but as a deliberate production choice. Reminds me a little bit of the days of Pearly Spencer in the vocal production style. It's a nice sort of spaghetti western tinged guitar song, grabbed my attention throughout, and I would say my favourite song on the album. Overall, more of the album uses the same production style than I would have liked, so a lot of it felt a little bit samey throughout. But again, there was nothing here that I particularly disliked. It feels like several of his other albums, but just not hitting the heights. Free Drinks at the end, though, was a banger. And I specifically wrote that. Free Drinks at the end is a banger. And I'm putting that album into third place overall so far. We then go back to 2003. Ringorama. Now, I was not looking forward to this album at all. I thought that the cover and the title of the album just sets it up to fail, to be honest. I think, why would you see that and think that's an album that I want to buy if you weren't automatically going to be buying a Ringo album? So I went into this very much not looking forward to it, I will admit. There's a song called Eye to Eye. Perhaps Ringo's heaviest song that he's done to date, but it was a good rocker to open. Instant Amnesia, another heavier song, but some great drum fills from Ringo, and he goes jazz in the middle. If this had appeared on a Paul McCartney album, I think we would be raving about it. We've then got a song called Never Without You. So this was the first album that Ringo had done since George died, and here is his tribute to George. And again, he also talks about his Beatle brothers, John and Paul, as well. It's got a George-style slide guitar on it and a Cloud 9 style production throughout. Ringo fits in as many George lyrical and musical references as he possibly can. And it's got Eric Clapton on lead guitar, which is kind of appropriate. Really nice song. I really enjoyed it. Imagine Me There, folk and jazz style bass intro, which reminded me of sort of Pentangle or Nick Drake. Lovely little gentle song intro. It builds in the middle and it's got lovely orchestration. A charming song, I thought that was. It's got a duet with Willie Nelson called Right One For Me. It keeps the tempo up, and to be honest, the album at this point is showing little sign of letting go of the pace or the quality. I'm really enjoying it so far. Elizabeth Reigns. Now, this was a strange one because when I reviewed this album for the first time, it was just 4 days after Her Majesty the Queen died. So it was kind of a little jarring to listen to this with some of the lyrics like "We don't really need a king" and "The Queen Mum is dead," and I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. It sounded to me like an archaeology era Ruttles song than anything else. But it's quite funny when Ringo at the end goes, "There goes me knighthood." You got there eventually, Richie. But a strange song, not helped by the time that I was listening to it in. English Garden, it's a playful sort of let 'em in style piano ballad. Ringo even sings "Someone's Knocking at the Door," someone's ringing the bell partway through. I hope you got permission for that, Ringo. It's kind of a melancholy precursor to Paul McCartney's English Tea that he would do a year or two later on Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. Overall, it was a really, really strong 3-song opening on this album, and it didn't let up much throughout. Some Ringo albums feature Paul McCartney or George Harrison. This one doesn't, but it felt like their stamp was all over it, holding his friends close. It was a real highlight of an album. I was shocked by how much I enjoyed this, and absolutely no doubt, so far, Ringorama goes into first place. Now, while I was preparing to do this Ringo journey, several people said to me, "Are you going to do Ringo's Christmas album?" And I thought, oh God, do I have to? And then I thought, yes, come on, if I'm going to do it, do this properly. So, I Want to Be Santa Claus from 1999. I actually had trouble getting hold of a copy of this album to review it, but I eventually managed to get hold of one. So, here goes, I Want to Be Christmas, Ringo, 1999. Starts off with a song called Come On Christmas, Christmas Come On. Worrying undertones of Gary Glitter in the intro. There is nothing Christmassy at all about this song, apart from the fact that it keeps mentioning the word Christmas. Other than that, it's just got no Christmas feel or vibe to it at all. Little Drummer Boy, I'm listening to it. It's good drumming from Ringo on this, but I'm just listening and thinking, why wouldn't I want to listen to Bing Crosby and David Bowie sing this instead, or Michael Jackson? There's better versions of this song out there. There's a few original songs on here. One of them is Christmas Eve, and this is a piano ballad, nice string backing, very slow tempo, but it suits the song, I think. It's a bit cheesy, but it stands head and shoulders over everything else that's been on this album so far. And I would have loved to have heard a Frank Sinatra version of this song. I think that could have been very interesting. There's a song called The Christmas Dance. It's cheesier than my Christmas Stilton and Wensleydale selection, but you'd have to be particularly grumpy to not at least tap your toes and find some enjoyment in this song, even though it's a bit daft and a bit silly. We've got a cover of the Beatles. Christmas Time Is Here Again from their Christmas Fan Club record of 1967. And Ringo focuses on the chorus, mainly the Christmas time is here again part. But a couple of times, and I was hoping that Ringo would do this, we get O-U-T spells out. We get a couple of blasts of that during the song. But without John Lennon doing his little Scottish poem and his I'll be strutting out my tether, it kind of lacks a little bit. And we had a baffling Calypso-style steel drum intro, White Christmas, which I can't fathom. It's very much kind of a Hawaiian or Caribbean-style version. And as Kevin McAllister said in Home Alone 2...
Who wants to spend Christmas in a tropical climate anyway?
And I kind of felt like that a bit about this song. This is never going to replace the Bing Crosby version in my affections. Overall, if this had been a 6-track EP of just the original songs that are on this album, I would be ranking this really high. I thought they were definitely the best part of the album compared to the covers. But some of the covers, like Winter Wonderland, really bring it down. This is not in the same league as Phil Spector's A Christmas Gift for You by any means, but I liked those original songs. But overall, it's going in 8th place. We then go back to 1998, Vertical Man. I've always really enjoyed that back cover as well. Now, this is an interesting one. Starts off with a decent, lively opener called One. We've then got a 3-song run, What in the World, Minefield and King of Broken Hearts, which I would say is the best 3-song run of Ringo's career. Superb, absolutely superb. What in the World, you've got Paul McCartney on bass and backing vocals. Immediately you think this is one of the best songs he has done in years. Minefield, another superb pop song. You've got Alanis Morissette and Steven Tyler from Aerosmith on backing vocals. The verses are quite interesting. They remind me a little bit of Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues or Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire, that kind of lyrical style. There's call-outs to the Maharishi and various Indian influences. A superb song. Then we've got King of Broken Hearts. The pace comes down a bit. It's not as up-tempo as the other two previous songs, but there is no drop in quality. There's a great slide guitar on here from George Harrison, kind of Free as a Bird style. This song oozes class. That is a phenomenal 3-song run. We've then got a cover of Love Me Do. Why? Apart from a publicity stunt. I just couldn't get my head around why Ringo did this, but, you know, his choice. We don't have to like it. I thought he should have got Andy White to play drums. That would have been fun. How ironic would that have been? All these years later, Ringo's still annoyed about the fact that he didn't get to play drums on the original version of Love Me Do. It'd have been funny if he'd have got Andy White in. La Di Da on here. It's one of those sort of typical Ringo sing-along songs. It works so well for Ringo. A lot of people would go nowhere near that song, but it works really well for him. Again, there's another appearance by Paul McCartney on here. In fact, some of this song was recorded at Paul's Hog Hill Mill studio. So it's a song that's kind of perfect for Ringo. Without Understanding, the first couple of seconds of this song, it's got vibes of the Beatles' Rain or Tomorrow Never Knows, very much kind of Revolver era, very sort of sinister melody and chords, and it's got some Indian vibes in it. Brian Wilson's on backing vocals, and it becomes something of an epic as it builds towards its climax. There's a song called I'll Be Fine Anywhere. Threatens to be silly, cheesy nonsense, but it's fun enough to be worth doing. And it's got a good lead guitar from George Harrison on there. We've even got George Martin production on I'm Yours, which is Ringo doing his good night style of vocal, children's lullaby kind of voice. Very sweet closer. Overall, I think this is a very enjoyable album. That 3-song run is amazing, and I'm putting it just behind Ringorama. Ringorama was a little bit more consistent throughout, even if it didn't quite have the highs of Vertical Man. But second place anyway. We then go back to 1992, Time Takes Time. This is going to be the last album that I'm going to include in this video, because I'm going to do all the others in a second video. And the reason that this is the stopping point is that Ringo's career seems to me to very much have had a line down the middle. Time Takes Time onwards, and then everything that comes before this. It's just so different stylistically to what he was doing before that I feel that this is a good cut-off point. But we've got Weight of the World on here, a very Beatle-y opening, 1964 kind of 12-string Rickenbacker guitars. Backing vocals sound very much like Paul and George, even though it's not. I thought that's probably Ringo's best pop song in years up to that point. There's a song called Golden Blunders, which captures your attention, even if the song itself doesn't. It's nothing to do with Golden Slumbers. It's a cover of a song from 1990 by a band called The Posies, and I didn't think it was a particularly great song. All in the Name of Love, nice rocky guitar solo. It sounds of its time. Now, I mean that as a compliment, because so often prior to this, Ringo's albums I'd increasingly felt out of the time. They just sounded outdated and poor production choices for the era, whereas this sounds like 1992, which is what you'd want on a 1992 album. So I was really pleased to hear that actually this actually sounds like Ringo in the time that he's in, rather than being out of his time. We've got a song called In a Heartbeat. Instrumentally, very nice and classy, this. Written by Diane Warren, who also wrote If I Could Turn Back Time for Cher and I Don't Want to Miss a Thing for Aerosmith. It's got Brian Wilson vibes. I could imagine him really appreciating this song, and I thought that this was one of the highlights of the album. Overall, I thought this album felt like it was heavily George Harrison influenced, even though he's not on here. That might be Jeff Lynne's presence potentially on some of the songs, his production choices, but also that it felt like that maybe spilled over into the production choices on some of the other songs, potentially. Definite Cloud 9 vibes here. But by far, I thought that Time Takes Time was Ringo's best album he'd done, probably since Goodnight Vienna. An enjoyable album without a doubt, and in my ranking here, it goes into third place, meaning that sort of from Time Takes Time onwards, I think he's only made 2 albums that are better than that. So, that's where I'm going to leave it for this video. I am then going to do a part 2 very soon where I'm going to do all the albums prior to Time Takes Time, and we're going to see where they fit into this Ringo ranking, and then I'm going to throw the entire Ringo ranking into the one that I've built so far of Paul, John and George's albums, and then we can move on to finishing this series with throwing the Beatles albums into the mix as well. Not quite sure how that's going to go. That's going to be a fun one. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about these Ringo albums down in the comments. I will see you again very soon. Goodbye.